So, besides for the Parsha, theoretically, this week is Shabbat HaGadol, which, there are different reasons why it's called Shabbat HaGadol, possibly because there's a big drasha, which is not happening this year. Everyone is giving their Skype Shabbat HaGadol or Zoom Shabbat HaGadol drashas today or tomorrow in advance of Shabbat HaGadol, or Shabbat HaGadol relates to the miracle of having the Karban Pesach, meaning having the sheep for the Karban Pesach in one's house, and the Mitzrayim not doing anything in advance, etc. But let me give you my brief Shabbat HaGadol thoughts before Shabbat. So this is actually what I wrote for the Haggadah guide, because somehow I got stuck with this section. At the end of Hallel, right, or when we finish Hallel, so we start Nirtzah, and what do we say in the Haggadah? You remember? Before we go into the famous songs, what do we do?
Shana Haba.
Before that, that's the end of a paragraph. So before that we say, Chasal Siddur Pesach, Ki Hilchato, Kichol Mishpato V'chukato, Kasher Zachin L'saderoto, Kein Nizke L'asoto. We have completed the Seder according to its laws, its judgments, its statutes, and just like we have merited to establish it, to set it up, so we should be zochet to do it. Zach shochein me'ona, komen kal adat mimana, bekarov nahel netechana, peduyim letzion birina, and then we say l'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. So the second half, the poetic part, is pure one who dwells in the habitation, raise up the congregation of the community, which whom can count, bring close, lead the plantings of the saplings redeemed to Tzion, enjoy next year in Yerushalayim. Now, I don't know if you ever thought about this slightly strange paragraph, specifically the line, Ka'asher zachinu l'saderoto, kein nizke la'asoto. Just like we have been privileged to establish it, we should be established to do it. Ever notice that line? Probably not. It's at the end. It's weird, no?
Yeah, slightly. Now
that you think about it, good. So why is it weird? It's weird because it's borrowed, and this brings us back to Shabbat HaGadol. It wasn't really written for the Seder at all. It was the end of a poem called Elohei Aruchot by Rabbi Yosef Tuv Elem, one of the Balei HaTosfot. Or if you want his technical name, not his nickname, it was Rabbi Yosef and Shmuel Bunfield. And he'd written this poem, Elohei Aruchot, which was basically a educational poem, summary of the halachot of Hilchot Pesach, to be read on Shabbat HaGadol in advance of Pesach, to give people a chazara on all the relevant Hilchot Pesach. And when you finished the poem, you said, Kishem zachinu l'saderoto, just like we've just learned it, kein nizke la'asoto. So we should be able to actually do it. When you realize that, it makes a lot more sense.
How did that end up getting thrown in the Haggadah?
So that's what I ended up writing about. So it's interesting. Now, it happens to be, I'm a big fan of this. The Rishonim loved this poem. They wrote Perushim on this poem. Rav Shmuel Falej wrote a Perush on this poem, which is found in the Or Zarua, to further educate people in Hilchot Pesach. I was so fond, and I'm so fond of this whole thing. Ora and I learned this together once, many years ago on Shabbat HaGadol. But one of the inspirations for my third son's first name, which is Shmuel, was in fact this Rosh Shmuel Falesh who wrote his Peirush on Yosef Tuvelim, because I was so impressed by being committed to this creativity. That's neither here nor there. So how does it get to our Haggadah? It makes a lot of sense in Shabbat HaGadol. It makes very little sense on at the end of our Seder. So
can we have a shir on Sunday on this?
On what? Elohei HaRuchot?
The poem and his favorite? Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to have time on Sunday. Sunday is my koshering day. But in theory, you're free to read it. If you have questions, you can reach out to me. We'll see if we have time. So I think, and I saw versions of this idea both in the Haggadah of Rav Yonasan Sachs, not Jonathan Sachs from England, but Yonasan Sachs from PESACH, his Haggadah Chazon Liyamim, and in Yosef Tzvi Rimon's Haggadah, where they both argue that essentially the misappropriation of this text is the point. Because in an ideal world, if you had the Beit HaMikdash, so you're right, when you finished your Seder, you had done everything you were supposed to do. But our Siddurim, as much as we prepare for them in advance, are by definition incomplete. We don't have a Korban Pesach. Maror is only Dirabanan because we don't have a Korban Pesach. We spend at least some of our Seder acknowledging the fact that it's incomplete, right? We say that we have a sandwich of matzah and maror because Zecher L'Mikdash Kehillel. We're doing what Hillel did when he had Pesach matzah and maror, but we don't. And therefore, you might want to say you did everything, but you didn't. And that explains the line that Yosef jumped to, which is, why do we tag on L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim to this paragraph? Because of this. Right? Because we finished the Seder, and we've now acknowledged that despite the fact that we're done, at some level, we're still where we are at Shabbat HaGadol, meaning we're still preparing, and if you think about it, it makes sense, because we actually talk about the halacha we're not capable of doing. Right? We actually spend part of the night educating ourselves about the Pesach, which we can't do, which means that we're in the same place, so to speak, as we were on Shabbat HaGadol, that we're educating ourselves for a future Seder, even though we're at the Seder. So what do? Once we acknowledge that, we have to then have a tefillah, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. Next year, maybe it'll be complete, and in fact, our Seder will be what it's supposed to be. And the Shmuel Haleket notes that this idea that we recognize that our Seder isn't complete is not just how we end the Seder, it's how we start the Seder. It's the bookends of the Seder. Because how do we start the Seder, or Magid, right, for these purposes? Holach Ma'anya, where we say, Hashata Avdei L'Shana Ba B'nei Chorin, Hashata Hacha L'Shana Ba B'Aradi Yisrael. Right, we say at the beginning and the end that we want to be somewhere else next year. Meaning, even though we're going through the Seder and celebrating our freedom, we recognize that it's incomplete. And that's why we invoke a poem that's actually meant to be said in advance of the Seder to remind you of what an ideal Seder looks like, because our Seder, as much as we're fulfilling the mitzvot, we also have an element of education acknowledging the fact that our Seder is incomplete. And the only thing I would add, because I think this is true every year, but in the end of the Var Torah, I wrote that I think this idea, as much as it's true in every year, because we're on the Beit HaMikdash, this is probably a year where most people are going to be feeling that. Right? That even after they get through the Seder and check off all the boxes and do everything they're supposed to do, they're not with their family, they're not, it's going to be a... I didn't actually watch the speech, but I heard that that's exactly the point. Yes, Yosef, that was exactly my thoughts this year. Is that I think this idea really rings true this year, because at the end of our Seder, we're dafka going to be feeling that it's incomplete. Right? And Chasal Siddur Pesach makes us realize that that's really true of every Seder. This year, I don't need to remind anyone, but I think everyone can have that tefillah in mind when you get to the end. You say Chasal Siddur Pesach Kilchato. but we still, we finished, but we really aren't finished. This is incomplete. It's palpably incomplete. This is the year when I think everybody's going to feel that. So this insight really struck me as powerful dafka this year. And I didn't actually see Bibi's speech last night, but I saw that someone quoted it, that the Prime Minister actually gave a little Dvar Torah last night in his health address, which was, look, guys, the original Seder was like this too, right? The original Seder was you stuck in your house with just your immediate family. That's what it is. And so go back to the original Seder. There is a certain element of the original Seder in this incomplete, less than ideal situation, which is at least something we can take some inspiration from. I saw a comic, Dafka, that put a perspective on this, where you have a picture of the original Seder in Mitzrayim, and a young kid saying, "Why can't I go outside? It's only the firstborns who are at risk." Right, which I thought was a good way of reminding us how much this Seder can commemorate that first Seder where you were really surrounded by plague, and that's why you were staying inside, was because God told you the only place to be safe was locked in your house away from the plague. Even if, as that comical son says, you were not the one in danger, but, other people were. Okay, so those are my Shabbat HaGadol